Hey, welcome to another episode of Sports Talk Law Talk. It is me, Byron Brown, and Jody Ayler coming to you live days before Halloween, days before Election Day. I'm not going to ask you who you're going to vote for, Jody. I'm a firm believer in you keep you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion. I totally adhere to that, but I will say this, and I can't vote. I'm a permanent resident, but I don't have my citizenship yet, so I can't vote. So whenever people ask me about this, which is a highly debated issue right now, I got an easy way out. I don't follow it. But I'm a little fearful that on Tuesday we're going to see some shenanigans happen. I hope I'm wrong, but it seems like it's a high possibility. You know for sure fucking Florida's going to fall apart. I mean, I laugh about it, but Florida's just full of people that if Trump loses, I feel like Florida's a really big Trump state. Maybe I could be wrong, but I think if Trump loses, Florida might fucking implode, which is obviously, not a good thing, but maybe a good thing. I don't know. That's where bath salts originated from. But anyways, what are your thoughts about the election? Again, keeping out who you're voting for, anything. Do you have any concerns? Do you share my concerns? Are you opposite to me this coming Tuesday? What are your thoughts?
No, I'm with you. What's different about this election is that it feels like it's so, and for a variety of people and a variety of reasons, so personal. So typically a presidential election is just kind of like, well, I'm going to vote for this person. Now it feels like it's a reflection. It's either an acceptance or a rejection of who you are as a human being. And so people are so worked up to defend themselves. They're not even necessarily like defending candidates. They feel like they're defending themselves or advocating for themselves. So when you get that level of sort of ego involved from everyone, it's going to be messy. And, but we've also created a system with TV and news coverage where that's kind of what it's being built on now, is just inflaming emotions and reacting and responding. So I don't know, man. We were talking a little bit before. I just kind of want to bury my head in the sand for the day and then wake up Wednesday morning like it's pre-internet days and just turn on my laptop and be like, okay, what happened? Because I don't want to get sucked into the play-by-play of the drama that this is going to be turned into, or that it already is. That's going to happen.
No, yeah, I completely agree. And I just don't understand why. I get it why people get excited and passionate about these issues. I really do. The part about it that just always kind of baffles me is like the anger and the hate and the violence. That seems to me to be very counterproductive. But to your point about hiding, so I remember when Trump was elected, I was in Las Vegas. I was staying at the Rio Hotel. Rio All Suites. There's a plug for you. Actually, Rio's really nice. It's a lot of walking at the Rio because it's so large of a property. But anyways, and I remember going to bed and it wasn't announced yet, right? Between Hillary and Trump. And so I was like, wonder what tomorrow's going to bring, right? So I clearly remember waking up and being like, holy fuck, like he really won. Like the host from The Apprentice is really the president of the United States. Like it was crazy to me. And but anyways, I kind of like that idea of like going to sleep and then waking up and seeing it and kind of missing, everything that's going to happen with the announcement of it. But
too much discipline, man. I don't know if I've got the discipline for that. I just don't know if I could do it. But what's crazy is you mentioned like in 2016 how you woke up and saw the results. I feel like Trump particularly brings all emotions out of all people at all times,
whether good or bad.
It just for the good or bad.
Yeah.
And that if he wins again this year, which there's a very good chance he can and will, I'm super curious about how all of the polling and media could have once again fallen down the same path of getting it that wrong again. Like at that point.
You know why I think it's
tear the whole thing down.
Yeah, you know why I think it's wrong is because I think there's a lot of people that support Trump and for obvious reasons don't want anyone to know. And here's two examples. Yeah. First example, Jay Cutler just came out, posted on Instagram, and he reposted, I think it was a Jack Nicklaus tweet or post saying that he was voting for Trump and he voted for Trump. And, I think I've already read some people obviously having an issue with him supporting Trump publicly like that. But that's exactly why people don't. So here's a quick little story. So I'm a personal injury attorney, obviously, and I have a client who's an Uber driver. This is about a year ago, and I'm not releasing anything that's confidential. And he tells me he picks up an African-American lady over by Santan Mall, and he's driving her, and she's in the back seat, he's in the front seat. And she says, "Do you like Trump?" And he instantly is like, shit, like how, like I'm not trying to argue with this lady. And he goes, I try to stay away from politics. And she says, fair enough. And she goes, I vote for Trump. And he's like, oh, okay. Why is that? And she goes, she was the first person that Trump got pardoned from prison.
Oh.
And I didn't know that she lived here in Chandler, Gilbert, Arizona. And she stood next to Trump at various rallies as a supporting figure. So what she said to him, which I found very interesting, is she said there's a lot of African-American people. And again, this was a year ago, and I know that Trump's really good at doing a bunch of dumb shit all the time. So maybe things have changed. But she said there's a very large portion of the African-American population that wants to vote for Trump, but whenever they're asked to in the polls, which probably happened with Hillary Clinton, and it's probably happening now with Biden, they say they're going to vote for Biden and before Clinton because they all the pressure, obviously, from their friends and relatives that are, at least some of them are African-American. So they feel the pressure, the societal pressure, and so they don't want to tell people who they're going to vote for, but they're going to vote for Trump. I think that silent majority is what happened to Clinton, and I don't know what's going to happen. Again, I'm staying as neutral as I can about this issue, but there's something on. Can you hit that button, please? There's just something about it that kind of feels familiar to me, and I agree. I think if anything now, more than ever, that silent majority, if it exists, I'm not saying it exists, but if it exists, it might have gotten bigger. It could have gotten smaller, though, too. But if you remember what happened on Election Day, when I went to sleep at the Rio, fortnights ago, it was unclear who was going to win. It was fairly close between Clinton. And when you look at the polls now, they're fairly close. Like, I think Biden's probably ahead in most of the areas, but it's not like he's 100 yards in front of him. Like, if we're talking about a football field, he's 5 or 10 yards in front of Trump, which is a close game, right?
Yep.
So I don't know who is going to win. I honestly hope whoever is elected, I just hope people are civil about it and calm and, don't injure people and kill people, quite honestly. I hope none of that happens, but.
This is going to be kind of a stretch of an analogy, but I don't know if you watched the World Series end earlier this week, but there was a big controversy in the World Series where the manager pulled the pitcher out of the game. Blake Snell was dominating, but the analytics told the manager, hey, third time through the lineup, you're not as effective. I don't care that you have 9 strikeouts in 5 innings. I'm pulling you out of the game. Because there's a certain devotion to analytics that some managers have that prevents them from tapping into human nature or just human instinct. Yeah. If Trump wins this second term and we spent 2 years paralyzed by the polls, I hope we just decide to get rid of all polling and focus on issues, focus on actual substance, because right now it's like American Idol. People feel like they're voting for the better singer. It's well, if we can start framing our presidential elections around actual issues, which I know some people try to do, but it feels like it's a reality TV show, not a presidential election.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it ends up being more of a popularity contest than what it should be, which you should be voting for someone who has clear opinions and views on certain issues. And I think what it's fallen down into is if you hate Trump, you're going to vote for Biden. And I mean, really, I feel like that's the way it is. And you either love or hate Trump. So if you love him, you're going to vote for him. If you hate him, even if you're a Republican, I've talked to some Republicans who say, even though they're a Republican, they're so upset with Trump that they're going to vote for Biden. But then I've also talked to Republicans who are Republican who don't like Trump but say they're going to vote for the Republican Party, aka vote for Trump because they're a Republican. So I don't know. This is one, I'm sure 10, 20 years from now, political science classes in universities around the world will be studying this election because, not only is that it's an election, but it's tied up with the Black Lives Matters and all the other social movements that are going on that, to my memory at least, we've never had a situation like this, which is, I think, a giant pressure cooker. And that's why I think the little blow, November 2nd, this Tuesday, and hopefully the blow doesn't cost people's lives or anything like that, but we'll see.
Hopefully a week from today, we're still doing this podcast.
Yeah, well, hey, I hope we are. I hope we are. But like how most things happen, I'm sure we're going to find out about it through social media, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of stuff about social media. And this is interesting, right? We have had, and we've talked about this, and it exists all the time, social media bullying, people doing things on social media, whether it's newsworthy or whether it's not newsworthy, we come across these things. And so we got this Michigan football fan, Daniel Ribby. This is back in November 24th, 2018. Michigan played Ohio, and he's a Michigan fan, and he, through Facebook Messenger, threatened Ohio players and threatened Urban Meyer. He'd actually done this in the past too, so this wasn't his first foray into making threats on social media. He said he was going to hurt people. He said he was going to kill people. He also made these threats against the basketball team and then also other teams that Michigan had played. Now, this is interesting because this is the first case I've heard of where a fan, gets excited and threatens a team. Most of the time, I think we kind of chalk that up to an emotional outburst and it's not very serious. But with everything happening socially today, this guy was charged with making a threat through interstate communication, which makes it a federal crime. As soon as it crosses state borders, it's a federal crime. And this guy got sentenced to, 12 months? Or 1 year, 1 day. The prosecutor wanted 15 months, but he ended up getting sentenced to 1 year and 1 day. It's one of those things. It almost reminds me of the Minority Report. Remember with Tom Cruise and the cogs and, trying to predict a murder or a crime, and then Tom Cruise would run down there. Tom had a drug problem in the movie, if you remember, right? And he would run down and he would stop it before it happened. Now, listen, it's weird to me. So this young man, he obviously made a mistake. He shouldn't have done what he did, and he obviously did it on multiple occasions, but he got a year for it. So this guy's going to sit out, have a timeout in an actual jail for 1 year because he made these threats on social media. Now, for one, I like it because I think more things like this have to happen because we have all too many people on the internet, those keyboard warriors, keyboard tough guys that say things, and these things impact people. I do not believe that people like Daniel Rippey really think about the words and think about the impact. I think for them it's just a knee-jerk reaction, but those knee-jerk reactions impact people. They impact people. They hurt people's feelings. They cause, especially kids and stuff. And I know this happened to adults, but my point is I have kids, and you hear about these stories with young adults, and we've heard about it for years, and the legal system provided no recourse, didn't do anything to these people uttering this nonsense on the internet. And I, for one, have zero issue with it. I think state and local governments should pass more laws that prevent people from spewing hate. I shouldn't say prevent them. It should limit their ability to do it by having a punishment attached to it. Something positive, maybe just jail time, but I'd like to see them do something constructive within the community. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's kind of that age-old debate we've had, freedom of speech, but you don't have freedom from consequences of your speech, right? So if you want to go online and kill someone, start threatening their physical well-being because you're angry that they lost a football game, you're free to do that, but there should be some accountability. So picking your lawyer brain, my question with this was there anything specific about this case that separates it from virtually every sporting event? Every time someone loses, someone's getting death threats, and we see news stories about it. You can search for it on social media. What was it about this case specifically that allowed them to prosecute him, because if the precedent is now set that if you threaten athletes or anyone online with physical harm and you could be sentenced to jail, there's a lot of motherfuckers going to jail, right?
Yeah.
Like, why was this one different? Can you figure that out just reading the news story?
Yeah, it's interesting because that was the exact thought that popped into my head. I was like, what makes this different from every other time? Now, just a quick little rewind. Obviously, awesome game, Cardinals, Seattle, but Gonzalez missed that field goal, and that's an example. Now, obviously, he came back and was able to redeem himself, and so almost no harm, no foul. But if Gonzalez didn't have an opportunity to redeem himself and kick that field goal, he would have faced most likely similar threats, which I think is bullshit. So, to answer your question, though, the difference, I think, between this and others is that this guy has a history of doing it. So, he's done it at least on 2 other occasions, which I've read, probably more occasions, and I think that went into the judge's decision. I've never read the judge's decision. I don't even know if there is a written decision about it, but that's the big indicator to me. The other thing, though, that it's not case specific, but it's societal specific, is we have everything happening within society today with Black Lives Matters and the protests and the violence and everything like that. And I think, and I've always said this, the law is notoriously long in the tooth to catch up with reality. And so I think what we're seeing, this case in Michigan, this judge in Michigan is doing what I think we'll see more of. I just think that he is at the front of it, where he saw someone with history and he cited the Sandy Hook shootings and the Columbine shootings in rendering his decision and said, hey, listen, like, this is what it could escalate to, which is what everyone has thought forever, right?
Yeah.
Is like, yeah, they haven't hurt anybody, but it's possible. And if you're going to say those very hateful and hurtful things, like you're going to kill someone and you're going to, hurt their kids and shit, fuck you. Like, if you're that person on the internet that does that, I got no remorse for you, man. And I think that's what we're seeing is a combination of 2 things. One, the legal system catching up with society. And number 2, we're seeing all of these social justice movements that I think are positive, and I think this is a result of some of those social justice movements. I think the courts are finally going, okay, enough's enough. We're seeing people organize through social media for negative ways, and I think this is the first thing that we're going to see. And then I think we're going to see legislatures write laws that are going to protect people. Is this going to happen overnight? No, the law doesn't move that quickly, but I think into next year, in 2021, I think you're going to see a lot of legislatures table these things. Why? Because legislatures react to what the public wants, because the public is going to vote for them. So I think it's something that we're going to see more of, and I think the reason we see it in this case is because this kid has a history of it.
So, in that same vein, I'm unclear what the law is with this. Like, if you and I were playing hockey together and we were playing pickup hockey and it was 2-on-2, you and me against, Brian and Forrest, and you let the game-winning goal in, and I turn to you like, Byron, I'm going to fucking kill you, man. Like, I can't believe you did that. I'm going to fucking kill you. Is that illegal? Like, so, making a threat to you in person, is that illegal?
Yeah, for sure it's illegal, 100%. However, and this is my experience with it is funny because I was a doorman and this was in Canada, but I'd have people say they're going to kill me like every night, right? And so when the cop came one time, I asked him about it because I knew that it was illegal. And he said, yeah, but you actually have to be in fear. And that's how a lot of these things work, right? Is like, it's really easy. If I punch you in the face and you have a broken nose, there's a broken nose, there's an x-ray, there's objective evidence of it, right? However, you threatening to kill me, other than me saying, hey, I'm really worried Jody's going to kill me, maybe I have some sleepless nights, maybe some other ailments manifest themselves that a doctor, a psychologist could write an opinion on. But for the most part, it's just that these subjective injuries and an emotional injury, anxiety, irritation, anger, all of those things, they're all subjective. So that's why it's really hard for the law, because what the spirit of the law always is that it's supposed to be clear and people are supposed to follow it. If a law is unclear, then the courts can deem the law to be ambiguous or unclear and strike down the law. And so that's what I think the problem is we've always focused on this objectiveness because it makes sense and it's fairly black and white. we've tried to avoid the subjectiveness in the legal system because humans are prone to make mistakes. And the more subjective things is, the more we're worried that we might punish someone who doesn't deserve a punishment. But that's where we are as a society. These more subjective injuries are manifesting themselves way more than they ever have. And I think that's why you see the courts and the legal system finally catching up and being like, okay, we have to do something, because that's what the court system is there to do. The court system is there to protect people and enforce laws. If there's no laws to enforce, then the court really has zero power to do anything, right? And so I think this is where we're seeing it being much more clear. So to answer your question, you telling me you're going to kill me on the hockey ice, yeah, by the textbook letter of the law, that's illegal. However, it's most likely a police officer wouldn't arrest you under those set of circumstances because, you know, we're playing a game, you're heated. Let's say you have no history of threatening me, then I don't think the police would. However, same scenario, let's say you have a history of threatening me and I have text messages and I have video of you showing up on my house, then I think you do get charged for uttering that. So it's a weird thing. I hate it about my profession, but we always say, when someone asks a question, you always say it depends, because it depends on the facts, right? Everything is fact specific. And I think that's what frustrates a lot of people when they hear things about the legal system and they're like, you know, hey, my Uncle Joey only got 1 year and he committed the exact same crime as, you know, Bobby did. But the problem is Bobby said maybe Bobby had a gun. Maybe your uncle didn't have a gun when he did the robbery. You know, maybe Bobby had no criminal history. Maybe your uncle has criminal history. I mean, there's all of these things that kind of can play into it. But it doesn't stop people so far from acting a fool. And that's what we see with a bunch of these Miami Hurricane football players. They got into a fight outside of a fraternity house. The video is fairly grainy, but it seems to me it was shot by someone who was in that melee. But there's 3 players, James Babu, Dimitri Mitsopoulos, and TJ Rush, were all suspended from the Miami Hurricanes. They all are facing multiple charges for their involvement within this. One person got hit with a golf club and a broken orbital bone. So, I mean, it got fairly serious. The thing that always baffles me about these things, and we see it every month, if not every week, young athletes and older athletes just making huge mistakes that kind of can unrail their entire career. Why do you think guys continue to do this? Is it just guys being guys and, you know, testosterone, and we're going to hear it's just all about a girl at the end of the day? Or what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, no, I think that's what it is. Like, it's college, right? The age-old jocks versus the fraternity is kind of like a stereotypical college event. To your point, it is kind of crazy that after all these years with cell phone cameras and technology and all these examples of if you do something wrong, someone's going to capture it, and then your professional career is going to be affected by it. It's still not enough of a guardrail for dudes to be like, oh, I probably shouldn't be getting into a fight if I'm on the football team. It's kind of a testament to the power of that it just feels like there's something instinctive about it. It must just naturally happen because dudes can't control themselves. It's crazy.
Yeah, man. When I was young, I got in a few little dust ups, and I always think like it's guys being guys on some level, you know, like that machismo or ego, whatever you want to refer to it, is always going to exist in guys. And guys are always going to fight over girls, and guys are always going to fight other guys over the stupidest shit ever. I would just like to see, you know, if I was the coach of the Hurricanes, if I was coach of any athletic, and maybe there's something in the bylaws or something that prevents this, but I would have like 6 people on call, security guards / drivers, and they would just follow everybody around and make sure they didn't get in shit. And I mean, I don't know why, if I was a parent and I had a kid who was playing at one of these big schools, I'd probably do that. You know, I would. My friend, interesting little side story, my buddy is, I think I can say this, my Sheldon Adelson, one of the richest men in the world. He owns the Venetian, the Palazzo, all the casinos in Macau. Yeah. So my buddy is one of his private security guards. And part of his job is he honestly flies, I won't name the college, but he flies to a college and he is a bodyguard for the guy's son. and he follows the son around everywhere. Everywhere. He goes to every class. He goes to the bar. He goes to friend's house just in case someone wants to kidnap this young kid. So people do it out there. This is my point. Obviously, that guy's a multi-billionaire probably. But these guys are athletes with money. I mean, these programs have a shit ton of money. So you can't even tell me that money's an issue. But it's hard to believe they don't have someone chaperoning, especially with COVID and everything else going on. It's just kind of baffling to me.
But don't you think, I mean, I get what you're saying, and that's like the guarantee to prevent it from happening. But isn't it, they're adults. You got to sink or swim on your own. You're responsible for your own behavior.
Are they adults, though, Jody? Are they adults?
I mean,
are they responsible?
By the law, they are.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, they're supposed to be. I mean, we know they're overgrown kids, but I mean, and granted, like I'm not guy that was in fights in college. I was at parties where fights happen, but I'm not the guy starting the fight. You know what I mean? But my parents always told me, my dad was always like, listen, college more is about what you learn outside of the classroom than it is what you learn inside the classroom. So I don't think like the NFL, if the context was fraternity versus football players, there was a typical fight. I don't think any of those dudes will have any red flags, but if it's a guy went to the trunk of his car, got out a baseball bat, and beat the shit out of somebody to within an inch of their life, well, that's not typical college behavior, you know what I mean? So as long as I think everyone's got to be kind of free to fail on their own, and I think even if you're a high-profile college football player, you kind of got to learn how to conduct yourself and what's right and wrong, and the only way to do it, it's like the overprotective parents, and all of us want to keep our kids from experiencing any bad things, but eventually they gotta figure it out on their own, right?
That's true. That's true. You would think they'd figure it out on their own. I always just worry that they're going to ruin their life somehow before they ever get older, because, hey, we've all made mistakes and we've all done dumb shit. I can only imagine if all of my shit was recorded,
right.
and then lived in forever, which is what some of these kids face. But from a fight melee to a celebration melee, Justin Turner he's very much upset. Major League Baseball. What can you tell us about the Justin Turner incident? And just a little segue into it. Justin Turner is a member of the LA Dodgers. He tested positive for COVID. He wasn't playing in the final game where the Dodgers won the World Series because he had to sit out because of the COVID test. And then what ended up happening, obviously the Dodgers won the World Series. Justin was elated. He ran down to the field. There's footage of him with a mask on, without a mask on. Obviously, the problem is he had his mask on and he was celebrating. The MLB has issued a statement chastising him. What are your thoughts?
So a little tweak to that is he was playing in the game. Okay. He played the first 6 innings of the game. He was on the field. He had 3 at-bats. In the middle of the World Series game, they found out he had a second test that had been a confirmed positive. He had previously tested positive Monday for COVID. And then Game 6 was on Tuesday night. He took a second test Tuesday morning. They got the results in the 6th inning of the World Series game, confirming it was a positive, not a false positive, but a real positive. They pulled him out of the game. He was supposed to be isolated, and he'd agreed to that. They immediately pulled him in and isolated him in a room in the stadium. And then everything that you said on is true. The Dodgers win. He ignores MLB security, rushes onto the field. Baseball claims that their security team pleaded with him to get back off the field. He just ignored them. You can see him taking pictures without his mask, with his mask, celebrating with his teammates. So I don't know that there's really much to do. Baseball doesn't really have it. I mean, the World Series is over. I mean, and you can't. He didn't do anything that compromised the integrity of the outcome. So it's not like he's got to be held responsible. I'm curious your thoughts. Like, we've talked about this off and on during this pandemic. He knows he was COVID positive. He went onto the field and knowingly exposed not just teammates, but family members were on the field. Wives, kids were on the field. If someone tests positive for COVID from that team, and God forbid something terrible happens in that transmission of the virus where a vulnerable member of their household is sort of connected to that, can he be held legally responsible knowing that he knew he was positive and still celebrated, or is it still too like, well, you can't prove that it was him that infected you at that moment?
It depends. I hate to be a smart ass. No, but it depends. So I guess I look at it two ways. One, if we have to make a couple of assumptions, like to place us a little bit in a vacuum here, right? So like if you assume no one else or everyone else who was on the field celebrating the Dodgers' victory, if they all had tests that were administered, say, the morning of, just like Turner, and they were negative, and then they were positive after, then Mr. Turner could be in trouble. He could be in trouble because then I think it would depend largely on how COVID impacts the person that was infected, because it's affected people differently. Some people have obviously tragically passed away. I've talked to other people who've tested positive in 3 or 4 days of kind of a malaise, a bad feeling, and they recover. Obviously, if something really serious and bad happens, I would think Mr. Turner could be liable, again, under that very strict set of circumstances. If someone didn't have a test in the morning and they had test days before, then I think anyone's ability to link up Turner's presence on the field with affecting people would be a lot harder to do.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it'll be, I don't think anything will come of this, just like you said. I don't think anything will come of it from the MLB, and I don't think anything will come from it from the general public. I did read this morning, LA County has ordered all of the Dodgers to quarantine for 2 weeks. That might be the only thing that really comes from them. But this is the thing, I don't know how strictly they're going to enforce that.
Right.
So let's assume that you're on the Dodgers and you don't live in LA, right? And you live in Tennessee. Is anyone going to make sure you quarantine in Tennessee?
Right.
And and then for the people that do live in LA, let's assume they have a second home. Let's just say they go to their second home. Is anyone going to ensure they quarantine? And this has kind of always been my problem with the whole thing is like, how does anyone know that anyone's quarantining?
Yeah.
I don't know, like no one's come up to me and gone like, I didn't quarantine, because no one's going to, right? So like, have I been around people that have tested positive for COVID? Probably. I haven't, and I've been tested and I've always tested negative for COVID. But this just brings up, what Turner did to me, because I agree. Listen, like let me ask you this. If you're a player on the LA Dodgers, right? And your wife and your 2 daughters come down to the field to celebrate with you. And let's assume everyone's healthy and happy, right? No one in your family has ever contracted COVID. And somehow we're able to prove that you and your family have never been around anybody who's been exposed to COVID. How would you feel? And I'm not talking days after. I'm talking in the moment, you celebrating, you look over and you're like, fuck, Turner's down here. And he tested positive. Like, what would you have that observation? Wouldn't you? What do you think the other players on the Dodgers? Because I haven't heard one player from the Dodgers say anything. I'm going to tell you what I think. I think all the players are like, fucking come down and celebrate with us.
Yeah. So, 100%. And here's the other thing. They're in a bubble. The MLB World Series was done in a bubble in Dallas, so they were all quarantining together. They'd already been exposed to Justin Turner. He had been around his teammates and their family members for the previous 48 hours or whatever. This is the pandemic in a nutshell, though, Byron, because everyone sitting at home wants to wag their finger at Justin Turner, like, how dare you? And meanwhile, everyone is making their own rules up as they go. Like, they're expecting Justin Turner to live up to a standard that they themselves aren't living up to. Like,
True.
I had this happen to me recently where I was with some extended family members, and we all got tested before we kind of got a vacation rental together. And while we were there, we were out on a walk, and I had this young couple come up to me and say, hey, will you take a picture of us on the bridge? I'm like, sure, no problem. So I took their phone, I took the picture, and then I went back to my car and I got my Purell and I put it on my hands and I went about my business. Yeah. And the family I was with, he's like, man, I would have told them no. I'm like, I'm not going to get it from touching their phone, man. He's like, no, but you could have gotten it just being in close proximity, you don't know where they've been. And I'm like, well, maybe, but I'm like, this is also someone who is renovating their house in the middle of a pandemic that literally has construction workers in and out of their home on a daily basis. And yet he's lecturing me about taking a picture from 10 feet away. Like, nothing makes any sense to anyone. They just all want to kind of judge people. So I have no issue with Justin Turner. I mean, Justin Turner should have been a little bit more careful,
100%,
knowing he was COVID positive. He was reckless, but I understand, contextually, I can understand he's the heart and soul of the team. He's one of the oldest and longest tenured members of the team. He's a beloved teammate. He hit over 300 in the World Series. He's been one of their better performers. So this is a third World Series that they finally broke through and won. They hadn't won as a franchise in 32 years. So people not being able to like put themselves in another human being's shoes and be like, oh, well, I would have just stayed in isolation and minded my own business. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. You would have been out celebrating just like anybody else would have been. And I would be. Now, I would feel like shit the next day, right? I would feel a lot of guilt the next day. But now, Byron, it's you mentioned the quarantine and how is anyone going to keep track? The people that know they were on the field and in a locker room with Justin Turner, now it's up to them to protect their vulnerable family members, right? And so now they need to take the right steps. But yeah, I think it's a little, I understand lecturing him a little bit, slapping his hand, but just be human being for a second.
Yeah, I can't imagine, as a young kid in Canada growing up, and I always wanted to win the Stanley Cup. I can't, and that's the analogy I do, right? Like, if I made it to the Stanley Cup finals, I made it to the NHL, you make it all the way to the Stanley Cup final, you get popped. And I didn't even know, I don't know why I glossed over the fact that he was already in the game, because that changes it to me too. I mean, he was already around those players. He was already probably around some of the family members and stuff too. But yeah, I don't know. I think if it was me and my team was winning the Stanley Cup, I would have zero thoughts in my head about anything other than go running down to the ice, in this case field, and celebrating with my teammates. And I bet if you'd ask Turner today, he'd probably be like, you know what, you're right. I probably should have handled myself differently, but in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have. Like, if he's going to be as honest as honest, he's like, hey, I feel bad about it, but look, this was a lifetime fucking dream of mine.
Right.
If he didn't go on that field, I guarantee he and every other family member and teammate at some point in their lives would look back and regret the fact that Turner didn't come onto the field and celebrate it. So I don't really think that Turner's a bad actor, but from one bad actor to another, we got Hopkins. We got D-Hop. We're here in Arizona, so we love Deandre Hopkins. Let me tell you, before I get into this, I think he's a very affable guy. Like, I've seen him in interviews. I think he's very articulate. He's very nice. He's very down to earth. He seems very quiet, reserved, a respectful individual. But he's made some news around the Valley as of late. And we got a video. There was a Trump, I guess they call these Trump caravans. I didn't even know something like this existed, but the Trump caravan is a whole bunch of vehicles with Trump flags and all their other propaganda hanging on them. And they drive down freeways as a group, kind of at a slower pace from what I've read. So if the speed limit says 55, they'd probably drive it, 35, 45. And the idea being, I guess, hey, we're going slow, people are going to notice us more. And so there's two sides to this story. And we've showed the video, so we'll let people kind of come to their own conclusions. But there's the one version where Deandre Hopkins was on a podcast and he explained his side, and his side goes, hey, I found myself in a group of cars. It was a Trump caravan. They were kind of swerving at me, and I think his words were they were fucking with me. So I kind of sped off, and I meant to throw him the peace sign like Carter, but my one finger hurt and it didn't make its way up there all the way. So there was a middle finger. The problem with that is there's a video of him doing the stone cold salute like this with two middle fingers. So, and then he goes on that day to what? I think have like 10 catches, a touchdown. I mean, he had a phenomenal game. But then the other version of the video we see is him in traffic driving aggressively. And yes, traffic was thick, but it doesn't appear from at least the videos I've seen, anyone swerving at him. Then he crosses 2 or 3 lanes all the way over to the far right shoulder. And then he's not in a travel lane, and he blasts by all of these people, gives them the double bird salute. There's also a picture of him. Someone took him driving his car, and he's driving like this. He's driving a Ferrari down the freeway, looking at his phone. That obviously doesn't do well for him either. What are your thoughts on this? And then we'll get into the implications, what might come down from the law enforcement and or the NFL.
So I've had a similar experience to Deandre Hopkins. I was on the 101 2 weekends ago, and the Trump train comes up from behind. And my experience with it is, it was probably about 30 lifted pickup trucks.
Yeah.
So they're big, they're loud.
They have to be lifted, right?
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the lifted trucks, overwhelming, the vast majority of them, and they're all flying gigantic American flags, Trump flags, Don't Tread on Me flags, Blue Lives Matter flags, and they're all double barrel flags on each side of the pickup bed truck.
Yeah.
And listen, you're not doing that unless you're trying to get people's attention.
I agree.
Right? So you're trying to elicit a response from people by provocatively, and they drive, I wouldn't say erratically, they're not driving recklessly, but they're changing speeds, they're slowing down, they're speeding up. Nothing dangerous, but they're driving to attract as much attention. This was my experience 2 weeks ago on the 101.
Right.
And so clearly they want people to react. Now, DeAndre Hopkins reacted, right?
Yeah.
Like, he did what a lot of us do when we're driving. It's almost like road rage, and you think to yourself, man, I want to cut that person off. I want to flip them the double bird. Some people do it, some people don't. I try to be as in control driving as I can, but I've got moments of the road rage too. And he's also responsible for his actions. Like, he drove like an asshole, right? Like, just because this traveling caravan of political supporters are trying to draw attention doesn't mean you can endanger their lives, your life, or other people's lives. So he's an asshole, but there was a certain victim mentality from some of the people in the caravan to the news media, like, well, we were just minding our own business and not doing it. It's like, listen, man, you're in a lifted truck with these giant flags driving as an organized caravan on a heavily trafficked freeway to get attention. You got attention. It's just not the kind that you necessarily want it, because no one wants to get in a car accident, right? So I think both sides are kind of assholes. Like, you don't need to do a caravan on the interstate, and you don't need to flip them the double birds and cut them off if you don't agree with what the caravan is, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. And listen, like, if you're DeAndre Hopkins, obviously he's an African-American man. And I think a lot of African-American men, at least that I talk to, have very strong feelings towards Trump. So I get that. I get his feeling with everything in the media and everything. So I understand he must be frustrated. And I think, like a lot of people, you know, you try to stay patient and in control as long as you can. I think you've alluded to it, you know, like you're a very calm individual. I can't even imagine you having road rage, but I think we all do have our moments. And it seems like he had a moment. I agree. Like, you don't want to see, you know, the star football player for the team that now seems to be Arizona Darlings, right? Because they're doing so well.
Yeah.
You just don't want to see him do that. You know, he was probably driving in excess of 100 miles an hour as he, you know, crosses a bunch of lanes of traffic, and then he goes on the shoulder, which obviously is dangerous to pass on the shoulder. But the interesting thing to me is the police aren't going to do shit for this, you know?
No.
And I don't, like, we don't have to get into why. I think we all kind of know why. But he's a star of the Arizona Cardinals. I just don't think that they're going to touch him. And then with everything political going on, I don't think they're going to. But they do have enough evidence to charge him, you know, by making an illegal pass on the shoulder, which he did. And there's clear evidence of it. And if the police had evidence of this, I think under different circumstances, they'd probably seek some charges. And maybe they will. I'm not taking a position one way or the other. I'm just saying I'd be a little surprised if they pursued him. They might have a conversation with him as opposed to giving him a ticket, and that's kind of the middle ground is, hey, DeAndre, don't do that again. And they'd probably ask for his autograph, and it'd probably be a very nice interaction. But yeah, you just don't want to see that from someone of Hopkins' stature. That's really, I've seen people get mad on the road. I've seen people do way stupider things on the road than what Hopkins did. I think he got frustrated. As I watch it, should he have done it? No. Was it something that was super uber dangerous that put people's lives in danger? I don't think so. I also think the cover-up's worse than the crime. So when those Trump supporters sit there and try to make themselves out to be like these innocent sort of, you're not fucking innocent. Like I've said it about people I see in the grocery store with Make America Great Again hats and, Glocks on their hips. I'm like, you're not looking for peace when you're doing that. You're not looking to have, a peaceful discussion with someone of opposite viewpoints. You're trying to ram your viewpoint down other people's mouths. And regardless of my viewpoint, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like anybody jamming anything down my throat. I'm going to have my own beliefs. I'm going to have them how I want them. And I think that's how everybody should. And I think we should all respect everyone's beliefs by not being a bunch of fucking assholes. But that doesn't seem to be the theme of 2020. I hate to end it with such a negative note, Jody. You know what I mean? I'll move on to this. I'll move on to one topic because I wanted to talk about it. And I briefly touched on it before we went on the air, but Stone Cold Steve Austin. We're talking about Deandre Hopkins. This is Stone Cold Steve Austin's, maybe not his number one signature move, but one of them. And there's a Kansas City Chiefs player, Chris Jones. He has soda, Stone Cold Jones Soda. He applied for a trademark for Stone Cold. If you're a wrestling fan, or even maybe not, most people know about Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's with the World Wrestling Entertainment, aka World Wrestling Federation, for years and years and years, and they've had that trademark. I hate for any Kansas City fan to feel bad, but Mr. Chris Jones is not going to be successful with applying for a trademark. What they're trying to do is say that he has the ability to use that because of common use, which means within the legal system, if you have a mark that you've used for a period of time, they will retroactively give you protection to use that. However, he came into the league in January of 2019. You don't need to know anything. Stone Cold existed for probably a decade before that. So they're going to lose that trademark decision. Trademarks are really kind of, they're really finicky. I know before the podcast, Jody and I talked on air about LeBron James trying to get Taco Tuesday, and Taco Tuesday is just so commonly used amongst anybody. The court turned down LeBron in that context. But D-Hop, we love you. We hate to throw you under the bus, but just please don't drive your Ferrari on the shoulder, and we'll all be cool, man. Keep catching the footballs. We all want to see that. And from Jody and I, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Please go to Instagram or go straight to YouTube and subscribe. We appreciate that. Check out our website. We have shirts and tank tops for sale on there as well. We appreciate you tuning in. Until next time, thank you very much.